Leon Wilson is the Chief of Digital Innovation and a CIO at the Cleveland Foundation. Leon recognizes the importance of each letter in the STEM acronym and encourages students to use their unique skills and talents to find their meaningful place in a variety of STEM-based careers.
My name is Leon Wilson. I'm the Chief of Digital Innovation and the CIO at the Cleveland Foundation. And what I do at the Cleveland Foundation is I wear two hats at the foundation. One, I'm the CIO. So I am the top executive overseeing all utilization of technology, data transformation, digital transformation, and providing all the endpoint devices, computers, laptops, cybersecurity, IT security protection. I oversee the department that manage all the tools and technologies that allow the Cleveland Foundation to perform its duties. The second hat that I wear is a unique hat. It's called Chief of Digital Innovation. At many foundations that does grant making, you have people that are called program officers or program directors. Those are the persons that work with nonprofits, work with intermediaries, and bestow grants to them, 1 year, 2 year grants, small grants, large grants. I do that under the auspice of digital innovation. And I do grant making here in the Northeast Ohio area, both at the macro level, helping out transforming the economy to be a more technology friendly economy, a more technology focused economy here in Northeast Ohio, but also doing what you hear a lot about, and especially if you're talking with CMSD kids, students, is addressing the digital divide. So I'm primarily responsible for defining the strategy for the Cleveland Foundation about how we do grant making to ensure that all residents in Greater Cleveland have access to affordable broadband internet access to the affordable computers and laptops that they need, as well as the digital literacy training that they need in order to utilize those tools.
That is such an amazing place to be, and an amazing thing to be doing. Can you tell me what brought you to where you are now? What's your educational background? What path brought you to your current role?
Okay, well, for the sake of this interview, I guess I'm one of the rare individuals, especially as a minority, where I actually went to college for a computer science degree back in the 80s. When it was just becoming a thing. So I did my undergraduate in computer science at Michigan State University. And after that, I began working as a program analyst in Fortune 500 companies. The first company I started working with was relocating to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and working for General Mills, the people who make Wheaties and Cheerios and Yoplait yogurt and Betty Crocker food products and stuff like that. And over the many years, I was actually in corporate America. I was in a private sector working in IT departments, helping out with systems analysis, systems design, networking, and things, and project management. I started to get very involved in project management back in the early 90s. So much so that I began teaching project management at local universities and community college, IT project management and e-business. I was right in the early days of e-business, and everybody putting a web front-end interface to their website, to their systems, to their mainframe systems, and so forth. I also am proud to say that the tools that you use today, things like Zillow and Trulio and Realtor.com, I was developing tools like that back in the mid 90s when you were using 24/4 baud modems and trying to allow people to go online, allow realtors to go online and showcase homes, properties with small photos and things of that nature, and give that web experience. So I always like to say that before Zillow, before Trulio, I was working with projects, I was working with teams back in the mid 90s, helping develop software and solutions for that industry before it really became a thing. And along the way, again, as I said, I worked in corporations, a lot of corporations, whether it was consumer good corporations, working at healthcare insurance companies like a couple of Blue Cross Blue Shields. And then because I'm originally from Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, even though I relocated to Minneapolis, Minnesota, I went back to Detroit area, and that allowed me to start working with a lot of automotive manufacturing companies and working in the auto industry under IT. with procurement. It was always the internal systems and stuff. Nothing really fancy. I wasn't creating new games. I wasn't working with virtual reality and stuff like that. It was just the internal systems, the accounting systems, the payroll systems, the online visual presence of those systems, and just doing a lot of that. And back in 2011, I got a phone call from a recruiter looking for me to asking if I'd be interested to work for a nonprofit. And at that time, I was doing quite well working in the private sector and making good money working in the private sector, managing teams, managing departments, working my way up the food chain, if you will. And I said, well, I can't work for a nonprofit because nonprofits probably can't afford me. That was just the old mantra. But they were pretty assistant, basically persevering and reaching out to me and pretty persistent to say, well, give it a try. We think you have the unique talents because you worked in corporate America, you've done consulting, you worked in a lot of other different industries, and we think you have the unique skills that can help with this particular nonprofit. So after looking at the job description, and what it asked me to do is to work with nonprofits, basically helping nonprofits understand how they can leverage technology. And because I had been teaching technology at that time at local universities, local community colleges and stuff like that, that's where I used those skills and my consulting experience to really work out with nonprofits back in Michigan to better understand how can they use technology, the kind of computer systems that they need to be investing in, and helping managing their IT departments with my small team because they couldn't afford to have their own in-house IT person. So they began outsourcing those responsibilities to my team, to my department at the nonprofit that I was working at, and just kind of providing that kind of insight. Fast forward another 4 years, back in 2015, because I was in Michigan working with nonprofits, but also some of my customers were small foundations, small community foundations, and even working with some of the bigger foundations that were based in Michigan, companies like Kresge Foundation or the Kellogg Foundation and people like that. I knew kind of what they did, how they operated, and when the position opened up here in Cleveland, to join the Cleveland Foundation in this newly defined position, as I just shared with you, twofold position, I jumped at the opportunity. And that's what led me to Cleveland. And since then, I have been working with helping the foundation transform how they utilize technology, but definitely being an advocate around Northeast Ohio, helping them understand how technology should be used for nonprofits, addressing the digital divide, and also working with a lot of intermediaries, working with the city, working with county about how they can leverage technology to be more innovative and technology driven.
That is such an incredible journey. I've got a lot of questions about that.
Go for it.
The first thing that strikes me, you said a minute ago that you weren't doing anything flashy like VR or making video games,
yeah,
which I get, but you were also building the infrastructure to keep these giant companies working and functioning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you were on the cutting edge of this back in the 80s when you got into what got you into this? What was 14 or 15-year-old Leon Wilson thinking about at the time that made you get into that voluntarily, like with open eyes?
When I was in high school, I started, I was fortunate the high school that I was at back in Detroit, Michigan, it was more of a college prep high school. It was a very prominent high school, the high school that Diana Ross went to and a lot of other celebrities that went to there. It was a college preparatory high school, but it was still a public high school. They had access to computers, and I started dibbling and dabbling into the first Apple Lisas and the first mid-range computers and said, I want to play with these computers. I want to work with computers. So then I got accepted to Michigan State in computer science because other universities, my grades may have not allowed me to enter computer science at that school. I might have do business in that school, but not computer science. I jumped at the opportunity. And within there, at that point in time, computer science was still, especially at university level, was still evolving. It was a branch of the field of mathematics. So you had to take a lot of math, which I wasn't great at. So I had to really struggle to get through there. But at that time, if you recall, that was the early years of Microsoft. And that was when IBM was the big mammoth in the industry. And I always dreamed about, maybe working with Microsoft on the next Microsoft operating system, or working at IBM, or at the time, Motorola was just coming out with cell phones and coming out with things. So
Right.
it was just something really exciting for me. I wanted to do it, but at the same time, I felt I had more passion with helping companies develop computer systems as opposed to developing hardware or developing, like say, gaming and artificial intelligence. Yes, artificial intelligence was around when I was in college, but at the time, I just wasn't feeling it.
Right. Right. Um, so I guess thinking about it now, I mean, you know the audience for this. This is going to be middle school and high school kids mostly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's K through 12, obviously, but those are the kids that are really starting to dig in and think about this kind of thing. You clearly get the value of STEM, right? Like
Mhm.
you've understood that, seems like always.
Yeah.
How do you describe it to other people, though, that might not necessarily have the same interest as you, or just might not have any idea what they want to do?
Well, I would say, first of all, you have to ask yourself again, how close in STEM do you want to be? Because now, with everything being digitally driven through technology, you can get involved in STEM on a peripheral, and it maybe not be like a hard science, but maybe a soft science, where again, you don't have to do computer science if all you want to do is do social media integration, or if you want to create websites and do things of that nature. But if you want to really get under hoods and really go into computer science, computer engineering, some college in the School of Businesses, they have what they call Management Information Systems, MIS. Those are more the harder disciplines where you will become a program analyst, a software engineer on computer networking, or some of that nature that are really building the guts of the technology that we all rely on these days. And at that time, I didn't have those kind of options because we didn't have the internet was still in its infancy when I was in college. We were
Right.
still doing things through bulletin boards and stuff like that. But so I didn't have that option. Students these days, they have a plethora of options. I know I still talk with some high school students, and especially some younger college students. And what really attracts them a lot of time is gaming. Is they want to get into gaming, or they want to get into digital design, digital artwork, and things of that nature. So they want to get into those aspects of STEM, if you will. But I would always say that if you're solidly rooted in the core fundamentals of STEM related, which is mathematics and critical thinking, then you will have a lot of flexibilities. If you're weak in mathematics, or if you're weak in critical thinking and problem solving, then you're gonna, not that you can't do it, but then you may have to pick those positions that are not so mathematically intensive.
Right. Right. Then you're going to business school.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to business school, but then you'll do the soft side of STEM. You might help out with the design of the website, but you don't code the website.
Mhm.
Again, UX design, user interface design. You may go into more the softer side of coming up with the requirements gathering, things of that nature, but you're not the ones actually writing the code.
Right. Right. And it strikes me and that you would have a better understanding than most people of this with your experience first in the private sector and then as a consultant, that you can get involved in a lot of different industries with, like you said, with that core skill set, with that core, because everything is digital now, everything is technology driven now. So
Absolutely.
if you've got the skill set, you can go work in agriculture if you want, and it's still a STEM job.
Well, that's the funny thing, you bring it up. So when I graduated, again, Google wasn't around. Google didn't exist. Yahoo didn't exist. Microsoft was only probably about 4 or 5 years old. It was IBM, Hewlett Packard, and Microsoft or digital. I mean, they were just a handful. But what I will say is that in every industry, in every Fortune 500 company, they have an IT department. So you talk about agriculture. Well, when I was back in Minneapolis, you could have worked for Cargill, the agro mogul, and you could have designed computer systems for Cargill to process how they deal with bringing in food supply and warehouse management, distribution and supply chains and things of that nature. Banking, you could go work at Key Bank in their IT department, or PNC Bank, or Huntington Bank. insurance. You can go work at Medical Mutual. You can go work. I mean, these are all the different companies that I work with. Law firms have IT departments. Accounting firms have IT departments. The Cleveland Clinic has an IT. Healthcare companies have IT departments. So there's an IT department in every major corporation that gives you. So you're still using your same tools, your coding skills, your analytical skills, your design skills. What you're now picking up is that industry domain. Do you understand how insurance works? Do you know how banking works? Do you understand how accounting works? Do you understand how law firms work? You will learn the industry, but in the field of STEM, especially when you talk about the technology of STEM, the T of it, you're very portable. You can, I mean, in my career, I joke with that. I've never stayed at a job more than 4 or 5 years, not because I was an early millennial, wanted to bounce around. It's because I had options, had lots of options, and their technology was always changing and evolving and so forth. So it's definitely something that gives you a lot of flexibility. It is definitely industry agnostic, that where you can go, but then it also means that you're mobile. As far as you're not locked to a particular community, you can float.
And so I'm curious to ask you now, when you were starting out, it was just on the cusp of the internet happening. I mean, the internet wasn't the internet yet, certainly not the way we think of it. Computers weren't computers, not the way we think of them. Fast forward to now, if you're a kid in school, technology is developing at a breakneck pace. There's this crush of information everywhere. What do you tell a kid? What advice do you have for a kid now exploring the world, thinking about what they like, what they don't like, and starting to consider, maybe I want to focus on this or I want to focus on that in longer term, and start to think about careers? What do you tell a kid in the crush of all of that information? How do you process it?
Yeah, well, some of it, I would say two things. One, it is through experimentation and exploration, where there's just going to be different jobs and occupation that you will just never heard of, and it will never come across your threshold until you stumble across it or till you bump into somebody. So get out and interact. Join clubs, join explorer groups, join other type of things, do visits to universities, here's what's out there. Just listen. But then secondly, if you do have a core passion, if you love art, then look at what can you do with technology and art. There's a ton of different occupations you can do in digital art and digital design. If you are in science, because what I always got to remind people is that when we say STEM, it seems like every 15 years we focus on one of the 4 letters, but not all 4 simultaneously. When I was in college, it was the E. Everybody wanted to be an engineer. Engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering. That was it. And now everybody wants to be the T. Technology, IT, technology, digital this, digital that. But if you think about it, the S, the science, and the M, the mathematics, are the anchors, are the bookends that allow you to get into T, to get into E.
Right.
So I would definitely say think long and hard as a student. Just kind of explore, just kind of wander, imagine. Do you like to write? Well, then maybe you can be a technical writer. And do you like to problem solve? And then maybe coding might be a thing for you. But then keep in mind, in engineering, it's all about problem solving too. It's another mode of problem solving. Science, where it's the hard science or the soft science, that is important too. We need chemists. We need biologists. We need a lot of other things. So we need all of it. We're not fixated on one particular of the STEM. And just think about what you're interested in, what you're gravitated to, what you think you will enjoy getting up every day doing and thriving on. But at the same time, don't be afraid that you might pivot. You may start off as a biologist and become a coder. You may start off as a coder and get into the M piece of it. So you may bounce around.
Can you, along your journey, can you think of any obstacles that you've had to overcome along the way? And thinking back about those obstacles, if a kid were to encounter the same thing now, what advice would you have?
Well, for me, the biggest obstacle, especially if you're trying to get into the hard sciences, whether it's biology, chemistry, computer science, or the engineering, mathematics. You have to have solid mathematics skills. You may not like it, but you can't run away from it. You can't do pseudo math. It's hardcore. You will struggle. You will struggle immensely if you have weak math skills. So you want to just brush up on there, seek tutors, go on Coursera, Udacity, take extra math classes and other kind of online courses, but beef up your mathematical skills. That will help you out immensely. If you can strengthen your mathematical skills, it will help out in all of the kind of aspects. As a person of color, then you're going to struggle with sometimes being the only person in the room in those particular fields, because those fields are definitely predominantly dominated by quite honestly, not even white Caucasian males. It's going to be predominantly by foreigners, by immigrants, people that come over here, go to school and stay and take up the jobs. So again, you are the minority of the minorities, if you will, in that particular space. So seek a social network, seek a support network. That's what got me through college, is that I wasn't the only one there. There were 3 other students that were African Americans from the Detroit area that were in computer science same time I was, and we made sure that each of us graduated. And we stay in touch right now. Join social groups, whether it's the National Society of Black Engineers, or if you're which covers all the STEMs, if you will, except for maybe mathematics. But seek a support network, because you're going to struggle. You're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to see, I may not be able to do this. And if you have people from your tribe that can tell you that I'm struggling with you, let's struggle together, you will more likely persevere and get through it.
Sure. I imagine it's like a lot of things, just knowing that you're not alone,
Exactly.
in
Exactly.
whatever you're
Knowing that you're
struggling
not
with in your
alone.
journey. Right.
Exactly. So seek a support group. You can't do it by yourself. I couldn't do it by myself. I couldn't do it alone. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I can tell you unequivocally, I wasn't a genius. I could not have done it. And plus, I didn't know what I didn't know. My parents, while they went to college, they didn't graduate from college. So they didn't see everything that a collegiate student would see and experience. So some of that stuff I had to learn on my own, or learn from my friends and other colleagues about how do we navigate about getting a first internship. What's that? In college. I didn't understand those concepts, or getting your first big job outside of college. And how do you present yourself? How do you carry yourself? How do you conduct yourself? How do you behave, your mannerisms and all that kind of stuff, that will help position you so that you're not stereotyped, as well as you're not pigeonholed.
Right. Last question. Beyond the acronym itself, what does STEM mean to you?
Oh boy, I always say that STEM to me is my form of art. I always say I'm not creative as an artist, but I'm creative when it comes to technology. So STEM to me is another form of experiencing creativity and freedom for me, as far as how my brain is wired.
That's such an incredible answer. I really appreciate that. And I think that's all I've got. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't, or anything else you'd like to say?
No, I definitely encourage, for any middle schooler, the earlier the better, but any middle school or high schooler, if you're remotely interested in STEM or think you might be interested in STEM, there are programs out there that can give you exposure into what are the various opportunities that you can have in STEM. So I would say reach out, ask for help. Don't be afraid. That's the part that I think sometimes we, especially as minorities, we feel like we got to do it on our own, or we're afraid to ask for help, because we might feel like we're inferior. Ask for help. Ask for help. There are people out there to help you and to help you and help you understand. If you come across somebody and you think you might want to do what they do, ask them if you can talk to them and get on a Zoom call and chat with them, or meet with them for coffee one time and really understand, all how they got to where they are. So I'm glad you're doing this, and I would hope and pray that many other students get exposure and get access to this, because accessibility is key to availability, and then that's where you might then say that's what I want to do.